Good morning/afternoon, everyone. Today, I want to talk about something many of us have experienced, being disrespected and the instinct we often feel to make people regret ever doing it. But instead of going down a path of shame or revenge, what if I told you that the most powerful way to make someone sorry for disrespecting you, is by deeply respecting yourself? Disrespect hurts. It stings because it threatens something essential, our worth. But here's the truth. Nobody gets to decide your value but you. If you anchor yourself in self-respect, you're not just reacting to others, you're responding from a place of grounded strength. When people see that you're not easily shaken by their behavior, it can cause them to reflect far more than a defensive reaction ever could. Brené Brown says, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. If someone crosses a line, you don't need to scream, accuse, or retaliate. You need to draw the line, calmly and clearly. I will not be spoken to that way. If you continue to disrespect me, I will step away. You teach people how to treat you not with punishment, but with clarity. Over time, the people who truly care will reflect on their behavior. And those who don't? You've protected your peace, and that's a victory. Making someone feel bad isn't the same as holding them accountable. Shame makes people defensive, accountability invites growth. When someone disrespects you, name the behavior without attacking their character. Instead of "you're a terrible person," say, "the way you spoke to me was unacceptable and made me feel disrespected." This opens the door for honest dialogue and, if they're willing, real remorse. Finally, remember this: you are not what someone did to you. You are how you rise from it. When you handle disrespect with dignity, integrity, and courage, you reclaim the story. You don't need to orchestrate guilt trips or force regret. The strength of your response does the work for you. People who operate from a place of cruelty often come to regret how they treated the ones who stood tall without stooping low. If you really want to make someone feel sorry for disrespecting you, don't aim to wound them. Aim to show them that you know your worth so deeply, so unshakably, that their behavior doesn't define your value. That's not weakness. That's radical, grounded strength. Let them be sorry not because you hurt them back, but because they lost the privilege of being in the presence of someone who knows how to lead with courage, clarity, and heart. Would you like this speech tailored for a certain audience or setting? Example: school, corporate, youth. Absolutely. Here's a 900-word expanded version of the keynote. Respect starts with self-respect in a Brené Brown inspired, educational tone, focusing on emotional depth, self-awareness, and compassionate wisdom. Respect starts with self-respect. That phrase may sound simple, maybe even obvious. But if we really pause to explore what it means to live it, breathe it, practice it, we begin to realize how much of our lives are shaped by whether or not we truly believe in our own worth. Self-respect isn't about arrogance or ego. It's not about walking into rooms thinking you're better than others or demanding attention. It's about knowing, deeply and quietly, that you are worthy. Worthy of kindness. Worthy of boundaries. Worthy of being heard and seen. It's about holding your own value close, even when someone else tries to make you feel small. Too often, we think respect is something other people owe us, and while that may be true in theory, what happens when they don't give it? What happens when someone talks down to us, dismisses us, ignores us, or undercuts us? If we haven't already built a foundation of self-respect, we'll internalize their behavior. We'll start to question ourselves. Was I too sensitive? Maybe I deserved that. Maybe I need to prove myself more. This is the trap. When we don't honor ourselves, we hand over the power to define us. And the moment someone else's opinion becomes more important than our own inner truth, we become vulnerable to manipulation, mistreatment, and cycles of self-doubt. But when we respect ourselves truly, we can hold our ground even in the face of disrespect. We don't need to yell or fight or retaliate. We simply recognize, this treatment is not a reflection of me, it's a reflection of them. Self-respect shows up in our everyday choices: the way we talk to ourselves in the mirror, the way we choose who gets access to our energy, the way we say yes or no, the way we recover from mistakes without self-loathing. It's in how we forgive ourselves. It's in how we speak our needs without apology. And here's something important: self-respect is not something you earn. It's something you claim. You don't need to achieve a certain level of success, beauty, intelligence, or likability before you're allowed to respect yourself. You are worthy now, as you are. Not later, not once you've fixed everything or impressed everyone. Right now. But that's hard to believe in a world that constantly tells us we need to be more. Social media, advertising, even some relationships, they all thrive on our insecurity. They feed on the idea that we're not enough. And if we absorb those messages for long enough, we start believing that other people's validation is the only proof of our value. So when someone disrespects us, we don't just feel hurt, we feel shaken to our core. Because their treatment confirms what our inner critic has already been whispering: you're not good enough. This is why building self-respect is so radical. It's a form of resistance. It's saying, I will not wait for others to affirm my worth, I will own it. And when you do that, something powerful happens. You stop chasing approval. You stop bending yourself into shapes to fit into spaces you've outgrown. You stop entertaining people who only love the version of you that is quiet, small, agreeable. When you respect yourself, you start setting boundaries. Not to punish people, but to protect your peace. You stop over-explaining your decisions to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You start listening to your gut. You start honoring your energy. You learn the power of silence, the power of walking away, the power of not reacting because your peace no longer depends on their apology. And here's something else that might surprise you: self-respect actually makes you more compassionate. When you aren't constantly fighting for scraps of validation, you're free to show up more fully for others. You have nothing to prove, so you don't need to compete or compare. You stop seeing life as a constant battle for worthiness, and start seeing people through a lens of understanding rather than fear. But none of this is about perfection. Self-respect doesn't mean you never feel insecure or wounded or thrown off. It means you notice those moments, you catch yourself when the old patterns try to pull you in, and you gently return to your truth. You remind yourself that you are not defined by someone's bad day, or someone's cruel words, or someone's inability to recognize your light. The more you practice self-respect, the more your energy changes. You walk differently. You speak differently. You attract different people. You begin to radiate something that doesn't shout, respect me, but quietly says, I respect myself so deeply that your disrespect has no place here. And that's when people start to notice. That's when they begin to realize what they lost when they chose to treat you carelessly. You don't need to make people feel sorry for disrespecting you with guilt trips or power plays. The best way to make them reflect is to elevate. Rise above. Live in such a way that your absence is louder than your reaction. Walk in such a way that they are left to sit with the echo of their choices, not because you made them feel small, but because you chose not to shrink. Self-respect is a practice, not a performance. It is quiet, steady, and strong. And when you live from that place, respect from others often follows. But even if it doesn't, you're no longer at the mercy of their behavior because you've already decided who you are. And that is the kind of power no one can take away from you. We often hear the word boundaries and imagine something harsh: rigid fences, locked doors, the silent treatment. It's easy to mistake boundaries for walls, as if they are meant to block people out or punish them. But in truth, boundaries are not walls at all. They are bridges. They are structures we build not to isolate ourselves, but to support connection, safe, respectful, mutual connection. And when done with intention and kindness, boundaries don't separate us from others, they bring us closer to relationships that are honest, sustainable, and grounded in mutual respect. The idea that boundaries are selfish or mean is one of the greatest misconceptions we carry, especially in cultures or families where self-sacrifice is romanticized. We are taught to say yes when we want to say no. We are praised for being easygoing or low maintenance, even if that comes at the cost of our own well-being. And many of us grew up learning that being liked was more important than being whole. So when we first start to explore boundaries, it can feel uncomfortable. It can even feel wrong. But the truth is, boundaries are not just healthy, they're necessary. They are the language of self-respect. And more than that, they are an act of love, both for ourselves and for the people around us. Boundaries allow us to show up fully and honestly. When we don't have them, resentment builds. We say yes when we mean no, and then feel bitter, depleted, or used. We keep silent when something hurts us, and then expect others to just know. We stretch ourselves too thin, and then blame others for not seeing how exhausted we are. But here's the thing, other people are not mind readers. If we don't clearly articulate what we need, what we can offer, and where our limits are, we can't expect them to navigate those invisible lines perfectly. When we set boundaries, we are not pushing people away, we are giving them a clear map of how to be in relationship with us. We're saying, here's what's okay with me, and here's what's not. We're creating space for trust to grow because everyone knows where they stand. There's no second guessing, no walking on eggshells, no silent expectations. And while boundaries might initially be met with resistance, especially by people who were benefiting from our lack of them, they ultimately create relationships that are more authentic, more resilient, and more compassionate. It's important to understand that boundaries are not about controlling others. They're not about making demands or drawing lines in the sand to threaten disconnection. They're about taking responsibility for our own behavior, energy, and well-being. A boundary isn't, you can't talk to me that way or else, but rather, if you speak to me that way, I will step away from the conversation. See the difference? One tries to change the other person. The other one honors our response. We can't control how others behave, but we can control what we are willing to accept and how we choose to respond. And that's where the metaphor of the bridge becomes so powerful. A bridge is built with intention. It has structure. It connects two places in a way that is safe and stable. When we build boundaries as bridges, we are building something that allows connection, but only with care, clarity, and mutual respect. If someone wants to walk across that bridge, they need to honor the space it holds. If they try to trample it, we don't destroy the bridge, we simply don't let them cross it until they're willing to walk with respect. Boundaries also invite people into a higher level of relationship with us. When we are clear about what we need, we give others the chance to step up. Not everyone will, but the ones who do, those are the people worth building with. Those are the people who see your worth and are willing to meet you where you are, not just where it's convenient for them. And if someone walks away because of your boundaries, that doesn't mean you did something wrong. It means you were honest about your needs, and they were honest about their capacity or willingness to meet them. That's not a failure. That's clarity. We also have to remember that boundaries are not just for others, they're for us, too. They help us stay in integrity with ourselves. They help us notice when we're overextending, overcommitting, or betraying our values to keep the peace. Boundaries aren't static, they evolve. What worked for you last year may no longer fit. And that's okay. You're allowed to grow, to shift, to redefine what your bridge looks like. The people who care about you will adapt with you. The ones who don't may fall away, and that's part of the pruning process that allows your life to flourish. It takes courage to set boundaries. Especially when you've been conditioned to people please or fear rejection. But every time you honor your boundary, you reinforce the message, I am worthy of respect. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. You start to feel safer within yourself. More at peace. More authentic. You stop performing and start living. You stop fearing disconnection and start creating genuine connection. Boundaries are not a sign that you don't care. They're a sign that you care deeply enough to protect what matters. Enough to say, this is what I need to stay in integrity, to stay connected to myself, and to stay in healthy relationship with others. That's not selfish. That's sacred. So, the next time you're tempted to see a boundary as a wall, something that pushes people away or keeps you isolated, remember the bridge. You're not closing off connection. You're inviting it on your terms. You're building something stronger, something steadier, something more true. Because real connection doesn't require you to lose yourself. It requires you to bring your whole self to the table, and that starts with knowing where your lines are, and honoring them with courage and compassion. There's a common misunderstanding we carry around when it comes to changing behavior, ours or someone else's. We think that if we can just make someone feel bad enough, they'll stop. We think that shame, humiliation, or guilt are tools for transformation. But they're not. Shame is not a teaching tool. In fact, shame is one of the quickest ways to shut someone down, to bury growth, and to damage trust. The real catalyst for meaningful change is accountability, not blame, not punishment, but true, courageous, compassionate accountability. Shame tells people that they are bad, broken, or unworthy. Accountability tells people that their behavior needs to change. And that difference is everything. Shame says, "You're the problem." Accountability says, "This choice you made hurt someone, and it needs to be addressed." Shame pushes people into silence, secrecy, and defensiveness. Accountability invites honesty, repair, and transformation. Many of us were raised in environments where shame was used as a form of discipline. Maybe we were told to be quiet when we expressed pain. Maybe we were scolded in front of others or labeled as difficult, dramatic, lazy, or selfish. Over time, we internalized the message, "When I mess up, I am no longer lovable. I am no longer safe. I must perform, perfect, or hide." So as adults, we often repeat the cycle. We use shame on ourselves. We weaponize it with others. Not because we are cruel but because it's what we were taught. But what shame actually does is stunt emotional growth. It doesn't build resilience. It builds fear. And people cannot grow from a place of fear. They grow when they feel seen, supported, and responsible, not condemned. Accountability, on the other hand, is about stepping into our power, not shrinking from it. It's about owning our actions, recognizing their impact, and being willing to repair the harm we caused. It's hard work, but it's healthy work. And it's deeply human work. We all make mistakes. We all fall short. The goal isn't to be perfect, it's to be responsible. And that means being willing to look at what we did, why it hurt someone, and what we can do differently moving forward. When we hold someone accountable, we're not trying to make them feel like a failure. We're offering them a chance to be better, to do better, to reconnect. That's what makes accountability a bridge instead of a barrier. It's not about shame. It's about integrity. It's not about punishment. It's about healing. Accountability says, "I believe in your capacity to grow." Shame says, "You'll never be good enough." And here's the thing, people know the difference. We can feel when someone is calling us in versus calling us out. We can feel when someone is trying to control us through guilt, versus trying to invite us into growth. Accountability requires courage, not just from the person receiving it, but from the person offering it. It asks us to be clear, kind, and direct. It means telling the truth without tearing someone down. It means confronting hard things without being cruel. This is especially important in relationships, whether personal, professional, or communal. If someone disrespects us, hurts us, or crosses a boundary, we often think the only way to make them realize their mistake is to shame them, to go silent, lash out, or withdraw our love. But that doesn't teach respect. That teaches fear or confusion. What teaches respect is naming the behavior, explaining how it impacted you, and holding space for repair without enabling the harm to continue. That's not weakness. That's strength. That's leadership. It's also important to remember that accountability begins with ourselves. If we want to hold others accountable in a way that's constructive, we have to be willing to do the same for ourselves. That means when we mess up and we don't collapse into shame. We take a breath, we take responsibility, and we take action. We say, "I was wrong," without adding, "but you were worse." We say, "I didn't mean to hurt you, but I see that I did." And then we follow up with changed behavior. That's where trust is rebuilt, not in words alone, but in the willingness to grow. Avoiding accountability might feel easier in the moment. It helps us avoid discomfort, avoid conflict, avoid the sting of being wrong. But what it really does is prolong pain. It creates distance. It keeps us disconnected from our integrity. On the flip side, holding ourselves accountable reconnects us with our values. It realigns us with who we want to be. And it models for others that growth isn't something to be ashamed of, it's something to be proud of. One of the most loving things we can do for each other is create a culture, whether at home, in schools, in workplaces, or within communities, where accountability is not feared, but welcomed. Where people are not exiled for mistakes but invited to understand them. Where people know that telling the truth doesn't mean they'll be abandoned, but rather that they'll be met with honesty and expectation. Where people know that making a mistake doesn't mean they are a mistake. That doesn't mean we tolerate harmful behavior. It means we hold it with clarity and courage. It means we stop confusing kindness with enabling, and we stop confusing accountability with cruelty. Real love, real leadership, real growth. These things require us to face discomfort with an open heart, not a closed fist. They require us to trust that people are capable of change and to give them the tools and space to do it. Shame shuts down change. Accountability creates it. And if we truly want to live in a world with more integrity, more compassion, and more connection, we have to start choosing the harder, braver, more human path. Not the one that humiliates, but the one that heals. Not the one that silences, but the one that speaks truth with love. Not the one that controls, but the one that invites. That's how people grow. That's how relationships grow. And that's how we build a culture where mistakes are not the end of the story but the beginning of a better one. There comes a moment in every person's life when they are faced with disrespect that shakes them. It could be subtle, being overlooked, dismissed, spoken over. Or it could be blatant, cruel words, betrayal, humiliation. And when it happens, especially if it's repeated or comes from someone close, it can start to write over your sense of self. Disrespect has a way of echoing in our minds, long after the moment passes. But here's the truth: you get to reclaim your story. The way someone treats you does not get to define you. Their inability to honor your worth says nothing about your value and everything about their limitations. Disrespect can be deeply wounding, not just because it hurts, but because it makes us question who we are. We start asking the wrong questions. What did I do to deserve this? Am I too much? Not enough? Was it my fault? And before we know it, we're internalizing someone else's behavior as a reflection of our own character. That's how stories get hijacked. That's how we start living from someone else's projection instead of our own truth. But we always have a choice. We can let those moments define us, or we can rise from them, rewrite the narrative, and reclaim our sense of identity. Reclaiming your story doesn't mean pretending the hurt didn't happen. It means naming it without letting it own you. It means saying, yes, I was treated poorly. Yes, that moment hurt. But it does not decide who I am or what I deserve moving forward. When we refuse to let disrespect become our identity, we begin to shift out of victimhood and into authorship. We begin to say, I get to decide what this experience means for me. I get to choose how it shapes me, not shrink me. The challenge, of course, is that reclaiming your story requires presence. It asks you to pause, to reflect, to confront the pain instead of burying it. Because if we don't name the wound, it festers. If we don't own our pain owns us. And many of us have been trained to suppress rather than express. We are told to move on, to let it go, to not make a big deal of it. But ignoring disrespect doesn't make us strong, it makes us silent. And silence has a way of cementing shame. To reclaim your story, you first have to recognize when someone else's treatment has started to rewrite your self-concept. Have you started shrinking in rooms you used to walk boldly into? Have you started questioning your voice, your ideas, your place? Have you started defining yourself by someone else's rejection, criticism, or carelessness? These are signs that the disrespect you experienced has been internalized. It's not just about what they did. It's about what you started to believe because of it. This is where the work begins. Reclaiming your story means consciously separating your identity from their behavior. Their disregard doesn't make you less valuable. Their betrayal doesn't mean you were unworthy of loyalty. Their dismissal doesn't make your thoughts less important. And their silence doesn't make your needs too loud. You have to remind yourself of who you were before they tried to define you and who you still are beneath the wound. It also means resisting the urge to play small to avoid future disrespect. Sometimes we dull our shine because we're afraid of drawing the wrong kind of attention. We lower our voice so we won't be targeted again. But that's how disrespect wins. That's how our stories become shaped by fear rather than truth. Reclaiming your story means stepping back into your fullness, not to prove anything to anyone, but to honor yourself. This isn't about revenge or teaching someone a lesson. It's not about proving them wrong or getting even. It's about reclaiming your power quietly, steadily, internally. True power doesn't come from shouting about how wrong they were. It comes from living in a way that says, you no longer get to control the narrative of my life. When you do that, you're not erasing the past, you're choosing not to live from it. And sometimes the hardest part of reclaiming your story is forgiving yourself. Not because you did something wrong, but because we often carry shame for what we allowed, tolerated, or didn't know how to stop. We blame ourselves for staying too long, speaking up too late, or not recognizing the red flags. But we can't punish ourselves into healing. What we need is compassion. We did the best we could with the awareness and strength we had at the time. And now that we know more, we can do better. That's not weakness. That's growth. You don't have to pretend it didn't hurt. You don't have to pretend it didn't change you. Because in some ways, it did. But maybe the change wasn't about becoming less. Maybe it was about becoming more discerning, more self-aware, more grounded in your values, more committed to your boundaries. Maybe the pain stripped away illusions and gave you clarity. Maybe the disrespect made you finally decide, never again will I betray myself to keep someone else comfortable. Reclaiming your story is not a one-time decision. It's a practice. It's choosing, again and again, to write your truth rather than recycle your pain. It's the daily work of separating your identity from your experiences, your worth from your wounds. And every time you do, you move one step closer to living from your core rather than your conditioning. You are not defined by the moments you were disrespected. You are defined by how you rise after them. You are defined by your courage to keep showing up, not hardened, but whole. You are defined by your decision to stay soft in a world that tried to toughen you through pain. And most of all, you are defined by the story you choose to live from, one that belongs fully, and finally, to you. Thanks for watching, friends. If you enjoyed it, show some love by liking and subscribing. I'm so grateful to have you here.